So today we're going to be adding some algebra into our work with angles. Go ahead and fill in the blanks. I'll read with you as you're writing it in, and then I'm going to do the entire lesson with you for today. So make sure you're paying very close attention and writing down all the work needed. We can use the properties of pairs of angles to write equations to solve for missing values. To do so, first, determine the relationship between the angles. If supplementary, add the expressions and set them equal to 180. If complementary, add the expressions and set them equal to 90. If congruent, set the expressions equal to each other. Second, you're going to solve for the variable. Third, you're going to substitute the solution into both original expressions to find the missing angle measure or measures. So here's our first example. So again, our first thing we have to do is decide whether the angles are supplementary, complementary, or congruent. So in this case, hopefully you're seeing that there's no right angle. So there's no way that these are complementary angles. So they're either supplementary or congruent. Then you also see that we have A up to C is an obtuse angle, as well as D over to B. So there's no way that two obtuse angles will add up to 180 degrees. So the only other choice is that they're congruent, and that makes sense because they're on opposite sides of a vertex, which means that they're vertical angles. So we're going to go ahead and set them equal to each other. 2x plus 4 equals 3x minus 50, and solve. So to solve this, we start by subtracting 2x from both sides. Remember, when you're solving an equation, you must have something on both sides of the equal sign to be able to solve it correctly. So the 2x's cancel out, and we get 4 equals x minus 50. We add 50, and x equals 54. So remember, that's not our final answer. Now we need to plug it in and find the angle measures. So if we plug in 54, we get 2 times 54 plus 4. And 2 times 54 is 108, plus 4 is 112. Now, the two angles are supposed to be congruent, so just to prove it, I'm going to also plug it into the other side. So 3 times 54 minus 50. 3 times 4 is 12, carry the 1. 3 times 5 is 15, plus 1 more is 162, minus 50 equals 112. So we got those two angles correct. So we know that this one is 112 degrees. This one is also 112 degrees. And now we can find the other two angles. So if those two are 112, they are supplementary to the other two. We can do 180 minus 112. Which gives us 10 minus 2 is 8, 7 minus 1 is 6, and then the ones cancel out. So both these two sides are 68 degrees. Okay, so let's continue with number 2. This time, notice that the two angles that are given are right next to each other, not on opposite sides of a vertex. Also notice that there is one obtuse angle and one acute angle. Okay, so an obtuse angle cannot be congruent to an acute angle. So that is our hint that these two must be supplementary, not congruent, and obviously not complementary because there's no 90-degree angle there. So since they form a straight line, we have one acute, one obtuse, and they're right next to each other, we know that they have to be supplementary angles. And we also know that supplementary angles add up to 180 degrees. So we're going to add them up and then set it equal to 180. So we can do 12x plus 4 plus 5x plus 6 equals 180. Combining like terms, 12x and 5x makes 17x. 4 and 6 makes 10. Subtracting 10. Remember, you want something on both sides of the equal sign. we get 17x equals 170. Divide by 17, divide by 17, and x equals 10. Now we plug that in, we get our angle measures. So we have 12 times 10 plus 4 is 120 plus 4, which is 124 degrees. Now remember, these were supplementary to begin with, so when I plug it into the next one, I'm not going to get the same angle. So we have 5 times 10 plus 6, which is 50 plus 6, or 56 degrees. And I know I'm right because if I add 124 and 56, I do get 180. So now I can fill in my angle measures. This one's 56 degrees, which means its vertical angle is also 56 degrees. This one is 124 degrees, which means its vertical angle is also 124 degrees. Okay, so now we're going to put some word problems into the mix. Two angles, angle A and angle B, are complementary. If the measure of angle A, that's how that's written, the measure of angle A equals x, and the measure of angle B equals 2x plus 30, find each angle measure. So we know they're complementary, which means together they add up to 90. So we're going to add them and set it equal to 90. So we have x plus 2x plus 30 equals 90. Adding the x's, we get 3x plus 30 equals 90. Subtracting 30, 3x equals 60. Dividing by 3, x equals 20. Now remember, that's just x. It's not the measure of the angles. We have to plug it in. So x actually is measure of angle A, since x is just x for measure of angle A. So angle A equals 20 degrees. Plug it in for the next measure. We have 2 times 20 plus 30, which is 40 plus 30, which is 70. So the measure of angle B is 70 degrees. And we know that we are correct because 70 and 20 makes 90. All right, so now we make it a little bit more challenging because it's not as straightforward as it has been. We have the measure of the complement of an angle is 20 degrees less than the measure of the angle. Find the angles. So right away, you hear complement, you should be thinking complementary, 90 degrees. So we could start by drawing yourself a diagram. We have a right angle, and we're splitting it into two angles. From those two angles, we know that one of the angles is 20 degrees less than the measure of the other angle. So we could put x as one of the angles and x minus 20 as the other angle. They're complementary, so they have to add up to 90. So we have x plus x minus 20 equals 90. Putting them together, 2x minus 20 equals 90. Adding 20, 2x equals 110. Dividing by 2, x equals 55 degrees. So our larger angle, the just x angle, is 55 degrees. And then if we plug that in, 55 minus 20 gives us our second angle of 35 degrees. And we know we're correct because 55 plus 35 equals 90. Okay, so again, the measure of the supplement of an angle is 6 less than twice the angle. Find the angle. So this time it says supplement, so we think supplementary. We know that means that we have to set them or add them and set them equal to 180. So we also know that supplementary is two angles that form one straight line. So we can draw a straight line and split it into two angles. We know that one of the angles is 6 less than twice the other angle. So I'm going to make one angle x and one 2x minus 6. when you're doing this, don't worry about the size of the angles too much, as our diagrams are never drawn to scale. It's just set up to help us see a visual that can help us set up our equation. So again, we said that the sum of those two angles equal to 180. So we have x plus 2x minus 6 equals 180. 180 because it says supplement. Adding, we get 3x minus 6 equals 180. Adding 6, 3x equals 186. Dividing by 3, and x equals, think of it this way, 3 goes into 18 6 times, and 3 goes into 6 twice. So x is 62 degrees. So that means this one angle is 62 degrees. And then we're going to plug that back in. 2 times 62 minus 6 is going to give us our other angle. 2 times 2 is 4, and 2 times 6 is 12, so 2 times 62 is 124. Minus 6 is 118. So this angle here is 118 degrees. And that, again, can be proven that we're correct because 8 and 2 make 10. And then, excuse me, I'm listening to my kids. Together, the 118 and the 62 would be 180 degrees, which means they are supplementary. Okay, lastly, we have a pair of adjacent angles. Now remember, adjacent means just next to each other. It does not mean that they have a sum of 180 or a sum of 90. And in this case, it says to us a pair of adjacent angles have a sum of 100. So what I'm going to do is draw an angle that is a little bit more than 90 degrees. I'm going to split it into two angles. And we're going to keep in mind that this whole angle is 100 degrees. The first angle is 10 more than half the second. So one of the angles has to just be x. And because it says 10 more than half, I'm going to assume that x is the bigger angle since we're going to be cutting it in half. 10 more than half is 1/2 x plus 10. And again, together, those two angles add up to 100. So we have x plus 1/2 x minus 10, or plus 10 rather, equals 100. So that's 1/2 or 1.5x plus 10 equals 100. Subtract the 10. And we have 1.5x equals 90. Divide by 1.5. Divide by 1.5. And x equals, well, I know that 15 goes into 96 times. So 1.5 is going to go into 60 times. So our x is 60 degrees. And then if we plug that in, 1/2 of 60 plus 10 is 30 plus 10, which is 40. And we all know that 60 plus 40 makes 100, so we are correct. So from here, you are going to try the exit ticket, and then you can go ahead and get started on tonight's homework.